They searched 5 winters and found nothing. Not a footprint, not a button, not a single reason to hope. But on the 6th year, when everyone else had stopped believing, a half-grey German shepherd lifted his head, caught a scent no human could feel, and dragged his handler toward a truth buried deeper than the snow that tried to hide it. Ruger didn't hesitate, because somewhere in that frozen mountain, 2 little girls were still waiting for someone to come back for them. Nathan Cole hadn't planned on coming back to Pine Hollow, not after everything the mountain had taken from him. But the road wound upward like a half-forgotten scar, and he followed it because there was nothing left in town that felt like a life. Only the cold, only the silence, only the weight of 5 years without answers. Beside him, Ruger sat tall in the passenger seat, head lifted, nose twitching at every shift in the wind. 7 years old and carved from muscle and memory, the German shepherd had once led entire search teams across blizzards and broken cliffs. Now he was retired, but no one had explained that to him. The dog still watched the world, as if someone, somewhere, needed him to stay alive. Nathan steered the truck through the last turn. The wipers scraped across the glass. Sleet hit the windshield hard enough to rattle, and then the lodge appeared. Pine Hollow Lodge stood at the clearing's edge like a forgotten witness. The roof leaned, the porch sagged, paint peeled in strips across the siding. For a moment, the building looked almost ashamed to be seen. Nathan swallowed hard. This was where he'd spent the worst winter of his career. The winter they lost 2 little girls named Amelia and Harper. The winter the mountain won. He killed the engine. The world fell into stillness. Even the storm seemed to hold its breath. Ruger jumped out first. His paws landed in deep snow, leaving perfect prints behind him. Nathan followed slowly, boots sinking until the cold reached bone. The air smelled like pine resin and something older, something metallic. It didn't feel like a homecoming. It felt like stepping back into a question he'd never been allowed to answer. From down the road came voices. 2 locals idled in a rusted pickup just long enough to glance over. Nathan recognized the way they looked at him. A mixture of curiosity and pity, sharpened around the edges by quiet judgment. One of them called out, "Back again, huh, Cole? Some things should stay buried." They drove off laughing, tires spitting snow. Nathan didn't bother replying. Pine Hollow had always been a town of whispers. They'd blamed him for not finding the girls. They'd blamed the storm. They'd blamed fate. But they'd never blamed themselves for giving up too early. Ruger suddenly stiffened. His ears shot forward, his nostrils flaring as he sniffed the wind with laser focus. Nathan raised a brow. Old habit or real alert? The dog answered by trotting toward the far corner of the yard. Then he stopped, head low, tail rigid. A warning posture. Nathan felt his chest tighten. Ruger began to dig. Not playful scratching, not random curiosity. This was purposeful, fast, determined. Snow flew behind him in frantic bursts. Nathan walked over, breath fogging the air. Ruger's paws hit something beneath the ice. A faint, muffled thud. Nathan crouched. "What did you find, buddy?" Ruger backed up half a step, giving him space but never taking his eyes off the hole. Nathan brushed the snow aside with gloved hands. Something pale peeked through the ice. Fabric. He tugged gently. A small piece tore free, pink cotton, frayed, patterned with faded cartoon stars. About the size of a child's sleeve. Nathan's stomach dropped. He recognized it, or thought he did. The detail, the color, the way the edge had been hand-stitched. He remembered Amelia's mother holding up a photo of her daughters. One wore a jacket with sleeves just like this. For a moment, time stopped. The cold felt sharper. The wind turned heavier. Nathan whispered to himself, "No way. It's been 5 years. No way." Ruger pressed his head against Nathan's shoulder, a steadying weight. The dog was breathing fast, the kind of breath he used when he was on scent, on mission. Nathan looked around the yard. Snow undisturbed. No tracks but his and Ruger's. No signs that anyone had been here recently. So how the hell did a piece of a child's jacket end up preserved under the ice right by the lodge? He stood slowly. The line between memory and dread blurred. Ruger kept staring at the pit he'd dug, nose quivering, muscles tensed. He wasn't confused, he wasn't guessing, he was certain. Nathan felt his throat tighten. He'd come here expecting broken wood, old regrets, and silence. But now the silence felt alive, like something waiting to speak. The mountain wasn't done with him. Nathan pocketed the scrap of cloth and turned toward the lodge door. Inside, the rooms were dark and stale, shadows clinging to the walls. Ruger padded in behind him, every sound echoing too loud against the empty space. He set his duffel down and stared at the piece of pink fabric again. 5 years of unanswered questions pressed against the back of his skull. Ruger sat beside him, watching him with those steady amber eyes. Nathan exhaled slowly. This wasn't a welcome. It wasn't even a warning. It was a message. Something here never ended. And his dog, the dog who'd found more bodies and survivors than any man Nathan ever served with, had just told him the truth in the only language he knew. They weren't alone. They had never been alone. Nathan whispered to Ruger, barely audible. "We shouldn't have come back." Ruger nudged his arm in quiet defiance. The wind rattled the shutters as if answering, and in the thick stillness of the old lodge, Nathan Cole felt the first tremor of the story he'd tried so long to bury. Something had survived the winter, and Ruger had just dug up its ghost. Snowstorms came and went over Pine Hollow like passing ghosts, but the whispers in town never changed. By the second morning of Nathan's return, the diner chatter had already sharpened into its familiar edge. 5 years, and they still talk about those girls. The waitress murmured to another customer. Amelia and Harper just walked into the snow and vanished. Someone else added quietly. Or someone helped them vanish. Nathan sat alone at the counter, nursing a cup of burnt coffee. He didn't join the conversation. He didn't need to. Every word ricocheted through him anyway. People still remembered the search teams, the barricaded roads, the parents screaming into the wind. They remembered everything except who had refused Nathan's request to widen the search perimeter. The sheriff at the time, the same man who still held the job. Nathan paid, said nothing, and stepped outside. Ruger waited in the truck bed, alert despite the cold. When he saw Nathan, he perked up and hopped down, landing beside him with practiced grace. "Ready to head back?" Nathan asked. Ruger didn't move. His head was tilted, pointed toward the line of pines across the road. His ears flicked once, twice. Then he let out a low, uneasy rumble. "What is it now?" Ruger's gaze stayed locked on the northern forest, the same direction where the girl's trail had once disappeared. Back at the lodge, the strangeness continued. That night, Ruger planted himself at the front door, body rigid, eyes glued to the tree line. Every few minutes he growled under his breath, the sound soft but edged with warning. Nathan tried calling him over. Ruger didn't budge. At 2:15 in the morning, the dog barked once, a deep, sharp sound that jolted Nathan out of a shallow sleep. Before Nathan could put on boots, Ruger ran down the hallway, nudging the bedroom door open with force. Nathan grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the living room. The temperature had dropped sharply, the windows frosted on the inside. Ruger stood still, staring at nothing, or at something Nathan couldn't see. Then Ruger bolted outside. Nathan followed, chest tight with the old dread he thought he'd buried. The yard was empty. Snow blanketed everything in white silence. He swung the beam of the flashlight across the tree line. Nothing. Only Ruger's tracks leading to the fence. The dog sniffed the air, tail straight, body tense. Then he returned to Nathan, nudged his knee, and trotted towards the back of the lodge. Nathan hesitated. Something about the way the dog moved felt deliberate, familiar. Ruger had worked dozens of searches with him, and this was the exact posture he'd take when scenting survivors. The living, not the dead. Nathan followed him behind the lodge. There, the snow looked disturbed. Not by an animal, not by wind. More like someone had knelt or crawled there recently. The pattern was irregular, like fingers dragging through the frost. Ruger began to dig again. Not frantic this time, but slow, methodical, tracing a scent line invisible to Nathan. When Nathan crouched beside him, he noticed the wall. At the base of the rocky ledge behind the lodge, the stone was scraped clean in a narrow vertical strip. Fresh rock dust clung to the ice. Someone had touched it. Someone had brushed away the snow deliberately. Nathan brushed his glove along the stone. There were indentations, shallow, like fingertips. His breath stilled. There were no tracks in the yard when he arrived. No signs of anyone visiting the property in years, and yet the scrape on the stone was less than a day old. Ruger pressed forward and sniffed the rock with intense focus. Then he backed up, pacing in a half-circle, whining softly. The sound was not fear. It was frustration. He was trying to locate something the wind had buried. Nathan's mind drifted back to the search routes from 5 years ago. The columns on the map they were forbidden to cross. The northern sector marked restricted. He remembered arguing with command. The storm is pushing scent that way. If they're alive, the girls could be trapped in the ravine. They shut him down. The official reason was avalanche risk. The real one was never explained. Now, standing at the back of the lodge, Nathan realized something he had never dared admit. The restricted zone started exactly where Ruger was standing. Ruger lifted his head suddenly. His ears snapped forward. Then he let out a single bark that echoed off the trees. Nathan followed his gaze toward the far ridge. For a moment he thought he saw something move. A shadow, a flicker. But the snow swallowed the shape before he could be sure. Nathan whispered, "What are you trying to show me?" Ruger walked to the wall again, nose pressed against the seam between stones. He sniffed deeply, then looked back at Nathan with a stare that pierced through the cold and straight into memory. Nathan felt his heart pound. He hadn't believed in signs for a long time. But Ruger wasn't a symbol. He wasn't a guess. He was a professional, a survivor, a dog who had pulled people out of collapsed cabins and frozen cars when every human had given up. And now Ruger was telling him that something lived on the other side of dread, on the other side of fear, on the other side of this very wall. Nathan whispered into the frost. Someone was here, and someone still might be. A gust of wind rushed down the ridge like a warning. Ruger growled again, deeper this time. The kind of growl he only used when the line between danger and discovery was razor thin. Nathan stood slowly, fingers brushing the scrap of pink cloth in his pocket. 5 years ago, the mountain took 2 girls without leaving a trace. Tonight, Ruger had found the first one. If the mountain thought it could hide the rest, it had just met the wrong dog. Ruger picked up the scent before Nathan even stepped off the back porch. The dog's head jerked sharply toward the northern tree line, nostrils flaring with an urgency that sent a chill through Nathan more than the cold ever could. This wasn't the stiff posture of a dog sensing danger. It was the focused, almost electric stance he used when tracking the living. "You've got something, don't you, buddy?" Ruger didn't wait for permission. He took off down the slope behind the lodge, paws kicking up powder. Nathan grabbed his jacket, flashlight, and the old radio that barely worked anymore, then followed. The deeper they moved into the forest, the quieter the world became. Pine branches bent under the weight of new snow. The wind stilled as if holding its breath. Ruger slowed at a cluster of fallen trees, nose sweeping low across the ground. Then he stopped. Nathan crouched beside him. There, half buried in the snow, lay a small glove. Bright blue, child-sized, no more than a year old from the looks of it. The fabric barely frayed. Too new to have been sitting through 5 winters. Nathan felt his pulse spike. He looked around the clearing. No other evidence of footsteps, no signs of someone returning for it. Just the glove, placed or dropped with quiet precision. Ruger nudged the glove once, then whined, a soft sound laced with frustration. He wanted to move. Nathan pocketed the glove and nodded. Lead the way. Ruger darted forward again, weaving between trees with the confidence of a dog who understood the stakes. His nose dragged through the snow, pulling him north, then west, then sharply left toward a thicket of brush pressed against a frozen creek bed. And then Ruger froze. Nathan stepped forward slowly, scanning the ground. Something thin and white poked out from the loose snow. He brushed it off. Nylon rope, twisted, frayed at one end. The knot amateur but tight. A restraint cut loose in a hurry. Nathan stared at it. His throat tightened. This wasn't a winter accident. It wasn't wandering children. Someone had tied them. Ruger let out a quiet growl and continued forward, crossing the frozen creek. His paws left sharp impressions on the ice. Nathan followed, boots cracking thin frost along the edges. The dog stopped again, this time at a set of distorted footprints. Footprints so small Nathan's heart clenched. They were staggered, uneven, as if the walker had been stumbling or limping. And they were fresh, within 48 hours at most. Ruger pressed his nose to the tracks, breathed in deeply, then looked up at Nathan with that unmistakable signal. Alive. Nathan's chest tightened. 5 years of silence, and now this. A glove too new, rope too clean, tracks too recent. The mountain wasn't revealing a body, it was showing a path. They followed the footprints until they reached a narrow pass between 2 ridges. Ahead, a dark opening yawned beneath layers of snow. A cave. Ruger lowered his body and crept toward the entrance, sniffing each side of the rocks. His tail stiffened, his breath quickened. The dog was trembling with instinct. Nathan approached carefully, brushing frost from the cave wall. Something caught his eye. Scratches, not natural, human, fingernail marks etched deep into the limestone. He whispered under his breath, "Someone was here." Footsteps crunched behind him. He spun, hand instinctively going to his belt even though he carried no weapon. A woman stood just beyond the tree line, bundled in a heavy coat with a press badge clipped to the strap of her backpack. Dark hair tucked into a beanie. Snowflakes speckled her lashes. She raised her hand slightly. "I'm not here to scare you." Nathan exhaled slowly. "Who are you?" "Emily Ross. Mountain Times. I've been following the missing girls case for years." She nodded toward the glove sticking out of his pocket. "Looks like you just found what no one else could." Nathan stiffened. "This area is off limits. Always has been." "Exactly," she said quietly. "And that's why it never made sense." Ruger walked between them, positioning himself squarely in front of Nathan, hackles slightly raised, but no bark. He wasn't threatened, only cautious. Emily crouched, keeping respectful distance. "Hi there, big guy. You're the real one running this operation, aren't you?" Ruger sniffed the air around her, then relaxed by a fraction. Enough for Nathan to lower his guard. Emily pulled a waterproof folder from her pack. She held it out, but not too close. 5 years, 2 missing girls, and a search grid that made no logical sense. "I've studied the original maps. The sheriff's team blocked the northern perimeter immediately. No avalanche risk reports, no wildlife alerts. They just closed it." Nathan looked back at the cave entrance. Ruger was now circling the perimeter, nose sweeping the ground in tight arcs. Emily continued. I think someone made sure no one looked in the right place. Nathan frowned. Why follow me? Because 2 days ago someone broke into my car and tore apart all my case files, but they didn't find everything. She tapped her temple. I remember what I read. Ruger barked once. Urgent, sharp. Nathan rushed to the cave mouth. Ruger was pawing frantically at a section of packed snow. Nathan cleared a layer with his gloves. A shoe print appeared beneath it. Small, delicate, new. Emily's breath caught. That is not 5 years old. Nathan didn't answer. His thoughts raced. Tracks, rope, glove, cave. Everything pointed to the same impossible truth. Ruger backed away from the cave entrance, posture shifting into a warning stance. Calm but taut. A signal Nathan had learned to respect without question. Someone else had been here very recently. Nathan straightened, his voice low. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't the mountain. Someone took those girls. Emily met his eyes, steady and certain, and whoever they were, they just came back. Ruger growled at the dark mouth of the cave, the sound rumbling deep and cold. The mountain wasn't giving up clues, it was telling them to hurry. By mid-morning, the sky over Pine Hollow dulled to a flat silver, the kind of quiet light that made the woods feel older, heavier. Nathan tightened his pack straps and checked Ruger's harness. The dog stood still, weight balanced, nostrils flaring towards the tree line, as if he already knew where they were going. Emily arrived with her notebook and a thermos tucked under her arm. You sure you want to check the restricted zone today? Nathan didn't answer at first. He looked up toward the northern ridge where the old search grid had abruptly stopped 5 years ago, like someone had drawn a boundary with a trembling hand. That border had haunted him longer than he cared to admit. Yeah, he said finally, I should have gone back there years ago. They started toward the forest, Ruger leading at a steady pace. He didn't wander or zigzag like he did on routine walks. His nose stayed low, breaths short, purposeful. Every few steps he glanced back at Nathan, urging him forward. Emily scribbled something. He's tracking, she murmured. He's remembering. Nathan corrected quietly. The woods narrowed into a corridor of snow-packed pines, branches bent under old ice, creaking when the wind sighed. Emily kept close, her boots crunching beside Nathan's. The deeper they went, the more uneasy she became. You know, the original search team said this area was too unstable to check. Nathan's jaw tightened. That was the official line. Emily slowed her step. But you never believed that. It wasn't something he liked admitting. But no, I didn't. Ruger suddenly stopped. His entire body stiffened. His breath hitched once, then he lunged forward, sniffing a shallow mound of snow pressed against a fallen log. Nathan knelt. Talk to me, buddy. What do you smell? Ruger pawed at the mound, ice scattering in sharp chunks. Beneath the surface, metal glinted faintly. A grey sheet, thin, cold, almost flush with the ground. Nathan brushed the snow away with his gloves. It wasn't a boulder. It was a panel. A square panel. Steel. Old. Bolted into the earth long before the storm cycles buried it. Emily leaned close. What is that? Ruger barked sharply, startling her. Then he nosed the corner of the panel, pushing insistently. Nathan placed his palm against the surface. The metal was cold enough to burn through the glove. He scraped along the edge where the steel met the frozen soil, and froze. A handprint. Small, about the size of a child's, pressed into the rust like a fossil, fingertips etched deep enough that you could see where each little nail had scraped. Emily covered her mouth. Nathan, that's a child's hand. Ruger lowered his head, sniffing the print gently, as if searching for the ghost of the one who left it. Nathan felt his heartbeat hammering. I didn't see this on any of the old maps. Emily swallowed. That's because the maps they gave the public were incomplete. He looked at her sharply. You sound sure of that. Emily hesitated. Then she pulled out a battered manila folder. I didn't want to tell you until I knew it mattered. But I got hold of the map Amelia and Harper's father submitted the week after they disappeared. He marked an area he was worried about. She unfolded the paper. The ink was smudged in places, but the message was clear. In the margin, next to a rough sketch of this part of the mountain, were scrawled words: Dangerous zone. Children warned never to enter. Do not delay investigation. Nathan's throat tightened. Their father tried to tell the search teams. Yes. Emily turned the map over. But right here, this stamp. She pointed to a faded red seal. This was the order that shut down the northern search entirely. Nathan leaned closer. His eyes narrowed. That's the sheriff's signature. Emily nodded. Damon Ridge. He wrote the restriction order, sealed off the whole zone. No follow-up, no explanations. Nathan stared back towards the hidden panel, the tiny handprint, the mound of snow no one had touched in 5 years. Something clenched deep in his chest. You think he knew something? I think he didn't want anyone knowing something, Emily said quietly. Ruger growled low, not at them, but at the ground beneath the steel. His hackles rose just slightly, ears pinned forward. Not aggression, alertness, focus. Nathan touched the dog's collar. That's the posture he takes when he hits live scent. Fresh scent. Emily looked around, startled. But no one lives out here. That's not what he's telling me. Nathan pressed harder along the edge of the panel until a piece of rusted bolt snapped off. Beneath it, darkness gaped through a narrow seam. A hollow space. Emily whispered, Is that a passage? Ruger whined softly, pressing his paw against the metal. Nathan leaned down and whispered into the seam, If someone's in there, you're not alone. Only silence answered. Emily shivered, the kind that didn't come from cold. Nathan stood. We're opening this tomorrow. Bring tools, bring lights, and don't tell anyone. Emily nodded. Anyone includes the sheriff, especially him. They headed back toward the lodge, but Ruger didn't move immediately. He stared at the panel one more time. Not barking, not whining, just watching. His eyes were fixed, steady, like he was memorizing the place in case someone tried to erase it again. Nathan whistled softly. Ruger finally turned and ran toward him, snow spraying behind his paws. Emily exhaled. He knew. He always knows. Nathan said. As they walked, the sky darkened, shadows thickening between the pines. Emily kept glancing over her shoulder. Nathan, she whispered. If that handprint belonged to one of the girls, why was it on the outside of a sealed panel? Nathan's voice was low, because someone closed it after they touched it. Ruger growled again, ears turning toward the ridge, as if hearing something the humans still could not. Emily hugged her coat tighter. Someone didn't just hide the truth, they buried it. Ruger looked up at Nathan, eyes sharp, waiting for the next command. Nathan swallowed hard. Tomorrow we dig. Night fell fast over Pine Hollow, the kind of darkness that swallowed the last traces of color long before the cold set in. The wind rattled the shutters, but inside the lodge Nathan managed a small fire. Ruger lay by the door, head on his paws, gaze fixed on the shadows beyond the frosted windows. Nathan was sorting through Emily's notes at the table when Ruger suddenly rose and stiffened. No growl, no sound. Just that absolute stillness that meant one thing. Someone was outside. Ruger moved to the door, nose pressed to the crack under it, breath sharp and focused. Nathan stood slowly. "What is it?" Ruger didn't look back. He barked once, hard and urgent. Nathan grabbed his coat and stepped into the freezing night. Ruger shot out ahead of him, paws slicing through the snow as he circled the porch. Nathan followed the dog's line of sight and saw it. Tracks. Small. Barely an imprint. Too small to be an adult. Too fresh to belong to the girls 5 years ago. Nathan's breath caught. These weren't old clues. Someone had been here within the past hour. Ruger followed the tracks toward the tree line, moving quickly but with controlled precision. Halfway to the woods he stopped, ears pinned forward. Nathan looked up and saw a figure between the trees. A man, tall enough to be an adult, bundled in a heavy coat, standing too still as if he had been watching the lodge. When Ruger barked again, the man jolted and sprinted deeper into the forest. Nathan cursed under his breath and gave chase. Branches whipped against his jacket as he ran. Ruger bounded ahead with terrifying speed, weaving through snow and brush. The stranger stumbled once but kept running, glancing back with wild eyes. Every time Ruger got close, the man veered off, almost slipping down a slope. Nathan yelled, "Stop!" The man didn't slow. He reached a cluster of rock formations and vanished behind them. By the time Nathan and Ruger crossed the ridge, the stranger was gone, swallowed by the white maze of the forest. Ruger stood at the edge of a drop-off, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the darkness below. Nathan rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. "It's okay. You tried." But Ruger didn't relax. His gaze stayed locked on the ravine. Nathan followed the stare, and a cold realization settled in. The man hadn't been wandering. He had been watching, waiting, maybe returning to something hidden. They walked back to the lodge in silence, Ruger circling the perimeter twice before following Nathan inside. Nathan slept little that night. Every time he dozed, Ruger's low growl brought him back awake, the dog pacing the floor as if expecting the stranger to return. At dawn, Ruger nudged Nathan awake and immediately trotted toward the back door. No hesitation, no sniffing the air. He had a direction, a purpose. Nathan grabbed his flashlight, radio, and gloves. "Lead on, buddy." Ruger pushed through the fresh snow behind the lodge and headed straight toward the ridge where they had lost the stranger. But instead of descending into the ravine, Ruger veered left, nose glued to the ground, tail rigid. They reached a mound of snow shaped oddly. Too straight, too symmetrical. Ruger barked sharply and began to dig. Snow flew everywhere. Nathan joined him. After several minutes, the packed crust broke away, revealing a metal surface beneath the ice. A hatch. Nathan's pulse pounded. It was small, reinforced with steel bracing. Not part of the lodge, not part of any official search structure. Ruger scratched at the edge until Nathan found a recessed handle. It took both hands and all his strength to wrench it open. The hatch groaned and released a waft of stale, trapped air. Ruger descended first, as if he had done this 1,000 times. Nathan switched on his flashlight and followed down a short ladder into a cramped underground shelter. The moment his boots hit the dirt floor, his breath froze in his chest. Children's blankets, a small mattress covered in cartoon prints, a plastic dinosaur missing one leg. Crayons scattered beside an overturned metal cup. Boxes of dry milk. Half-eaten granola bars. Everything meticulously arranged, but lived in, used recently. Nathan swallowed hard. This wasn't a burial site. It was a place someone had kept children alive. Ruger sniffed around the room with intense focus, lingering on the blankets. His tail lifted just slightly. He recognized a scent. Nathan lifted a tiny sweater from a pile of clothing. Near the collar, someone had stitched the letters HR in pink thread. Harper Ross. Nathan's chest tightened until he could barely breathe. He turned slowly, flashlight quivering in his hand. They lived here. They survived. A voice echoed from above. "Nathan?" Emily climbed down the ladder, face pale when she saw the room. Her gaze moved slowly across the small boxes of food, the toys, the worn blankets. She whispered, "These things aren't 5 years old. Some of them are brand new." Nathan nodded once. Someone has been keeping them alive. For years. Emily stepped back as the truth hit her. This wasn't a cave someone stumbled into. This was a hidden shelter. Stocked, maintained, protected. But now it was abandoned. Emily's voice trembled. If they were here, why leave suddenly? Where would they go? Nathan stared at the hatch above them. He thought of the stranger running into the woods. He thought of the small footprints circling the lodge. He thought of Ruger waking him every few hours as if he sensed someone close. He whispered the question neither of them wanted to say aloud. "Where are the girls now?" Ruger turned to face the ladder. His ears perked, his body stiffened, and for the first time since stepping into the shelter, Nathan felt it too. Not dread, not fear, something else. Someone above them, moving through the snow, watching. The storm rolled in without warning, a wall of white that swallowed the ridge in minutes. Nathan secured the lodge shutters while Emily radioed the county. "Dispatch," but the wind drowned every signal. Ruger paced the front hall again and again, nails clicking on the wood. The storm didn't frighten him. Something else did. Nathan had only just thrown more wood on the fire when Ruger froze in place. His entire body stiffened. His ears shot up. Then he lifted his head and did something Nathan had never heard from him. He howled. Not a warning howl, not a lonely one. A broken, desperate sound that cracked through the room like a siren. Nathan dropped everything and ran outside. Ruger was already gone, a dark blur vanishing into the storm. The dog's barks cut through the blizzard like frantic beacons. Nathan sprinted, blinded by the snow, slipping on the steep slope. Emily followed behind, shouting for him to slow down, but he couldn't. Ruger wasn't panicking. He was responding. Someone was in danger. He traced Ruger's voice to a cluster of pines bent under heavy ice. Then he saw it. Ruger was digging like his life depended on it. Snow flew in all directions. His paws tore at the ice until they bled. But he didn't stop. He wouldn't stop. Nathan reached him. Ruger stepped aside for half a second, letting Nathan see what he'd found. A hole in the snow. Deep. Narrow. A sinkhole that hadn't existed yesterday. Nathan pointed his flashlight down. A small arm was sticking out from the ice. Emily screamed. Nathan dropped to his knees and tore into the snow with everything he had. Ruger dug beside him, snarling at the frozen crust as if he could fight it into shattering. Nathan's hands hit something solid. A child's shoulder. He dug faster, clearing the face. A girl lay beneath the ice, barely conscious. Her lips blue, her hair matted against her cheek. "Amelia." Emily sobbed. "She's alive. Nathan, she's alive." Nathan lifted her carefully. Amelia's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Finally, her voice cracked through the storm. "Harper. Still down there." Nathan's blood ran icy cold. There was another body below. He shoved Emily his flashlight. "Keep her awake. Do not let her close her eyes." Ruger had already moved to a second patch of snow, digging even more wildly than before. Nathan dropped beside him. The ground here was harder, deeper, frozen solid with layers of compacted ice. He and Ruger dug until their fingers numbed and their breaths turned ragged. Every second felt like a countdown. Every gust of wind felt like a warning. A faint, muffled cry drifted up. "Harper!" Nathan's chest locked. Then he shouted through the storm. "I hear you. Hold on. We're coming." The ice below them began to crack. Emily shouted for them to be careful, but time had already run thin. Nathan shoved both arms into the widening hole, feeling blindly until his hand brushed fabric. A coat, a tiny arm tangled beneath debris. The ice shifted again. Ruger lunged forward, teeth gripping the edge of a broken slab, pulling it back with a strength born only of survival and desperate loyalty. The slab gave way. Nathan reached deeper, grabbed Harper's waist and hauled her upward. Her body was limp, cold, barely breathing. The hole rumbled beneath them. The snowpack groaned. Ruger barked sharply, jumping back. The ground was collapsing. Nathan threw Harper into Emily's arms and yelled, "Run!" They scrambled up the ridge as the entire sinkhole caved in behind them with a roar. Ruger was the last to jump clear, landing beside Nathan in a spray of snow. The dog pressed against him, panting hard, trembling with exhaustion but still alert, still ready to fight the mountain again if he had to. Emily held both girls against her chest, sobbing into their hair. Nathan knelt, breath burning in his lungs, staring at Ruger. "You found them," he whispered. "You found both of them." Ruger looked back with steady amber eyes. He had never stopped searching. Not 5 years ago, not last night, not ever. The storm raged so violently that it felt alive, slashing sideways across the ridge, blinding Nathan as he crawled back towards the sinkhole. Harper's faint cry still echoed in his skull, a fragile thread of sound wrapped in fear. Ruger was already halfway down the icy slope, claws scraping against frozen rock. He barked sharply, the sound cutting through the blizzard like a beacon. Nathan slid beside him and shined his flashlight into the pit. Harper lay wedged under a slab of blue ice. Her breaths came shallow, each one a painful tremor. Snow had already buried most of her legs. Her lips were nearly purple. Nathan shouted down to her, "Harper, stay with me. Do you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, barely responsive. Ruger thrust his head towards the opening, whining, shoving his shoulder against the narrow gap as if he could push the ice away himself. He barked again, guiding Nathan's hands toward the exact spot where the slab pinned her. Nathan dropped to his stomach and crawled forward. The cold stung through his coat, biting into his ribs. The ground beneath him creaked a warning. He ignored it. He dug around the edges of the frozen slab, fingers numb, breath ragged. Ruger tried to wedge himself deeper, pressing his body tight against Nathan's hip, refusing to leave. Then a sound split the storm. A voice. "You shouldn't have come back, Cole." Nathan's heart clenched. He turned. A man stood at the top of the ridge. The same gaunt figure who had watched the lodge days earlier. His face was red from the cold, his eyes wild with exhaustion and something darker. In one hand he held a rusted ice axe. Snow clung to his beard like frostbite spreading across him. Nathan rose halfway, shielding Harper instinctively. "Who are you?" The man walked closer, boots crunching through the ice. His voice shook with anger. "I used to be the one they trusted up here. I kept people alive. Until one mistake, one accident, one family that wanted someone to blame." Nathan stared at him, piecing it together. "You were on the search team 5 years ago." "I was more than that," the man snapped. "I was their lead, their best hope, and they threw me out like trash after that hiker died on my watch." His chest heaved. "When the storm took those 2 girls, I knew the mountain brought them to me. It knew I could keep them safe when no one else could." Emily gasped behind Nathan. "You took them! You hid them for 5 years!" He didn't flinch. "The world out there is dangerous. People don't listen. People don't see. But the mountain understood me." Nathan stepped forward, tension coiling in his muscles. "They were just children. They were mine to protect." The man barked. "Until you came back, you ruined everything." Ruger growled, deep and low. The man lifted the axe. "Back away from the girl, Cole. You're not taking them." A tremor rocked the ground. Snow cascaded down the ridge like white fire. Nathan knew the pit would collapse any moment. So he made a choice. He didn't back away. He dove. Nathan slid down the last few feet and wrapped his arms around the slab, trapping Harper. Ruger immediately wedged himself beside him, pushing with all his strength. The ice groaned, resisting, then shifted. Harper whimpered. Her breath hitched. Nathan gritted his teeth. "Come on, come on!" The man above screamed in fury and charged down the ridge. Emily shouted his name. "Nathan, look out!" But Ruger was faster. The dog hurled himself up the slope, slamming into the man with enough force to knock the axe loose. It clattered across the ice. Ruger growled and snapped, planting himself between Nathan and the attacker. The man swung his fist, missing, stumbling. Ruger lunged again, driving him back, forcing him to defend instead of attack. A blur of muscle, fur, and instinct. Nathan used the moment. He braced himself against the inner wall of the pit and heaved the slab upward. It shifted an inch. Then Ruger barked, a single sharp command as if urging him to try again. Nathan roared through the strain and lifted. The slab gave way. He pulled Harper free, lifting her small, freezing body into his arms. Emily rushed down the ridge, sliding on her knees to grab Amelia, who held her sister with what little strength she had left. Above them, the man lunged again, but the ice beneath his boots cracked open. He stumbled, fell backward into the snow, and disappeared behind a curtain of white. Nathan didn't wait to see where he landed. The ground shuddered. Emily screamed, "Nathan, the ridge!" The sinkhole collapsed behind them, swallowing the space where Harper had been seconds before. Snow thundered downward, crashing like an avalanche in miniature. Nathan sprinted up the slope with Harper in his arms. Emily followed, gripping Amelia. Ruger stayed behind them, barking, driving them forward, never once letting the collapsing snow get close. They reached the top just as the pit caved in entirely. Nathan fell to his knees, clutching Harper to his chest. Emily held both girls tightly, tears streaming down her face. Ruger stood at the edge, chest rising and falling, his fur coated in ice and snow, looking down into the void he had pulled them all away from. Nathan placed a hand on his neck, breath trembling. "You saved them," he whispered. Ruger leaned into the touch, exhausted but unbroken. Behind them, the wind finally began to settle, the storm losing its fury. For the first time in 5 years, both girls were alive, and the mountain, for a moment, stood perfectly still. Word traveled through Pine Hollow faster than the storm that nearly buried them. By the time the rescue teams arrived at the ridge, the story was already racing through town. 2 girls missing for 5 winters. Found alive. Found in the snow. Found because a dog refused to stop digging. Nathan barely remembered the descent down the mountain. He remembered the weight of Harper in his arms, the way Amelia clung to Emily's jacket, and Ruger trotting beside the stretcher teams, refusing to leave the girl's side even when ordered back. His fur was still crusted with ice, his paws bleeding from the hours he'd spent clawing at the frozen ground, but he walked with his head high, unshaken. At the hospital, floodlights cut through the dark like stadium beams. Reporters swarmed the entrance. Police cars lined the street. Paramedics rushed both girls inside immediately, shouting vitals, warming blankets wrapped around their tiny bodies. Nathan stepped back from the doors as they swung shut. The last glimpse he caught was Harper's hand reaching toward Ruger, barely conscious, as if thanking him one more time. Ruger pressed his nose to the glass before the nurses pulled the curtains. Emily stood beside Nathan, her breath shaking out in frosty bursts. She wiped her eyes, then squared her shoulders. "They're alive." "My God, Nathan, they're actually alive." Nathan didn't answer. His voice was stuck somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. He looked at Ruger, who sat at his feet, leaning heavily against his leg. Nathan crouched and checked the cuts along the dog's paws. "You did it, boy. You held on when none of us knew where to look." Ruger closed his eyes, pressing his head into Nathan's chest. Behind them, a deputy approached. "Cole, Sheriff wants you back at the station." "Now." Emily's brows pulled together. "What for?" The deputy hesitated. "I can't say, but it's about the initial investigation 5 years ago." Nathan felt something cold settle in his stomach. He exchanged a glance with Emily, then tightened Ruger's collar and followed. Inside the Pine Hollow Sheriff's office, a storm was already brewing. Papers spread across tables, whiteboards covered in old timelines, old maps, faded photos of Amelia and Harper. Officers whispered in tight circles. And in the center of it all, Sheriff Damon Ridge sat with his elbows on his desk, his face a hard, unreadable mask. Nathan stopped in the doorway. "You wanted to see me." The sheriff didn't lift his gaze at first. Then he tossed a file onto the desk. "Do you know what this is?" Nathan recognized the folder immediately. It was from the original search, the red-marked areas, the zones that were supposedly cleared, places no one was allowed to revisit because of avalanche risk. Emily stepped forward. "Those weren't cleared properly, were they?" Sheriff Ridge's jaw tightened. "I followed procedure." Nathan nearly laughed. "Did you?" "Because Ruger found a shelter under one of those zones. You knew someone was out there. You saw those tracks 5 years ago. Why didn't you expand the range?" Ridge stood sharply, but Nathan didn't flinch. The officers in the room watched silently. The sheriff spoke finally, his voice cracked with something that sounded like fear. "I didn't want another death. After what happened to my son on that mountain, I couldn't authorize more risk. I thought the girls were gone. I thought—" It was over. Emily stared at him, as if seeing the truth for the first time. "So you folded the map, hid the most dangerous areas, and let a whole town believe the girls were dead." Ridge lowered his head. Nathan's voice was low. "You didn't just fail them. You kept people like me from going back." The room pulsed with tension. Finally, Ridge looked at his deputies and nodded. "Take my badge." A hush swept the room as they removed his weapon and shield. Ridge didn't resist. He simply walked out into the snow, a broken silhouette swallowed by the night. Outside the station, reporters had gathered, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. "Nathan Cole, is it true Ruger located both girls? How long were they trapped? Did you always believe they were alive?" Nathan held Ruger close, feeling the dog's heartbeat under his palm. Ruger lifted his head, ears alert, tail barely wagging despite exhaustion. Nathan's voice was steady when he spoke. "I didn't find those girls. Ruger did. He never stopped searching. Not 5 years ago, not this week, not ever." Ruger leaned into him, and the crowd fell silent, as if they'd witnessed something sacred. Emily stepped beside them, her notebook tucked under her arm. Reporters turned toward her, too. "Is it true you're the one who uncovered the missing evidence?" One asked. Emily inhaled deeply. "What I uncovered is the truth. And I'm writing the whole story, every detail. The girls deserve that. Their families deserve that. And so does anyone who's ever trusted that the mountain hides only snow." Nathan gave her a quiet, grateful nod. The hospital doors opened then, and a doctor approached. Amelia and Harper were stable, warming up, responding well. They were asking for the dog. Ruger's ears perked up. Nathan knelt beside him. "You ready to see them?" The dog didn't wait for permission. He trotted toward the hospital, tail finally lifting, steps steady and confident despite everything he'd endured. As the automatic doors slid open, warm light spilled onto Ruger's fur, turning him almost golden. Hope walking on 4 legs. For the first time in 5 years, Pine Hollow felt like a place where light was allowed to return. 1 year later, the mountain looked different. Not softer, not safer, but calmer, as if it had finally let go of its long-held breath. The snow still rolled down in thick drifts every winter. The wind still carried its sharp edge, but Pine Hollow Lodge no longer stood as an abandoned relic swallowed by storms. It had become something else entirely, a refuge, a sanctuary, a promise. The townspeople now called it the Hollow Center for Recovery and Search Support, but most locals still used the old name. The building had been repaired board by board, the porch restored, the windows widened to let in more light. The old fireplace still burned day and night, but now there were benches arranged in a circle around it, where parents sat with counselors and kids traced drawings into the wood grain. Nathan stood a little outside all the bustle, arms folded, eyes scanning the tree line like he couldn't help himself. Some habits, especially the ones shaped by loss, never really left. But there was peace in him now, a steady warmth beneath the ribs instead of that old, hollow ache. Beside him sat Ruger, older around the muzzle, his black fur now dusted with silver. His joints were slower to bend in the mornings, but his ears still twitched at the slightest shift in wind. His gaze followed every movement in the lodge yard, alert but relaxed, like a retired guardian who hadn't quite convinced himself he was allowed to rest. Nathan knelt beside him and scratched the soft spot behind his ear. "You still see everything, don't you?" Ruger leaned into the touch, eyes half closed, tail brushing the snow in slow, deliberate taps. Children's voices carried from the hill behind them. 2 sets of footsteps thundered down the slope. Amelia and Harper, both bundled in bright coats, raced toward Ruger with the kind of joy that made the cold meaningless. Ruger's ears perked before they even reached the yard. Amelia dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around his neck. Harper pressed her cheek against his forehead. "Hi, Ruger. We missed you," Harper whispered. Ruger lifted his head and bumped her gently, as if reminding her he never forgot a scent, especially not hers. Nathan watched them with a quiet smile. The girls had grown. Amelia's eyes were no longer haunted. Harper laughed freely now instead of looking over her shoulder. Time hadn't erased what they'd been through, but it had carried them farther from the edge. Emily emerged from the lodge a moment later, carrying a clipboard stacked with intake forms. Her scarf was pulled tight against the cold, and her breath fogged the air as she approached. Another 2 families checked in. "They drove 3 hours to get here," she said. Word of the center had spread farther than anyone expected. Reporters visited, trauma specialists volunteered, and parents who once blamed themselves now found comfort in knowing the mountain was no longer a place of unanswered questions. Nathan nodded. "We'll take care of them. They all just need a place to land for a while." Emily studied him. "Funny, a year ago you barely wanted to talk to anyone. Now you're running an entire volunteer search team." Nathan shrugged. "I just go where Ruger points me." Emily smiled. That soft one he'd come to know well. He points pretty well. As if on cue, Ruger stood and trotted towards the tree line, nose lifted, drawing in long, thoughtful breaths. Nathan's posture shifted instinctively. "Relax," Emily said. "He's not alerting. Just checking the perimeter." Nathan exhaled, because she was right. Ruger wasn't stiff or tense. He was just doing what he'd always done, keeping watch. The girls followed him, giggling. Amelia patted Ruger's side. "Do you want to show us your trail again, the one you took when you found us?" Nathan stiffened, but Amelia's voice was bright, not trembling. She wasn't reliving the past. She was reclaiming it. Ruger gave a deep, reassuring woof and started walking towards the ridge path, slow enough that the girls could keep up. Nathan exchanged a nervous look with Emily. They're okay, Emily whispered. Trust them. He did. He trusted Ruger too, more than he trusted most people. Nathan walked behind them, keeping his distance. Amelia and Harper trailed after Ruger as he padded to the clearing where the old search grid had been first laid out. They stopped beneath a pine tree, its trunk marked faintly by a strip of red cloth, one of the original markers still clinging stubbornly through the years. Amelia touched the cloth gently. I remember hearing voices here. I remember hoping someone would find us. Harper looked up at Ruger. When I saw you digging, I thought I was dreaming. But you really were there, right? Ruger stepped closer and rested his chin in her lap. Harper beamed. That means yes. Nathan swallowed hard. There were days he wanted to forget that night. But then there were moments like this, quiet and steady, where memory didn't hurt, it simply existed. Emily joined them, her boots crunching softly over the snow. The board wants to paint a mural in the new therapy room, something for the kids. They asked what they should put in the center. Nathan looked at Ruger. Isn't it obvious? The girls chimed in at the same time. Ruger. Harper wrapped her arms around the dog's neck again. He's the dog who found us. Ruger blinked slowly, accepting the title like it was simply another piece of the world he carried. Not prideful, just true. The sun began to dip through the trees, casting long gold stripes across the snow. Amelia reached out and took her sister's hand. Harper squeezed back. For a long moment, they stood quietly beside Ruger, three survivors bound by something neither time nor winter could erase. Nathan watched them and felt something settle in him, something like peace, but stronger, a kind of certainty. The mountain had taken 2 girls for 5 years, but now, through the lodge, through the center, through Ruger, it was giving back. Every child who climbed those stairs found someone listening. Every parent found hope they thought they'd lost. Every lost hiker rescued by the new volunteer squad felt the echo of the night. Ruger barked against the wind and refused to stop until he uncovered the truth. Nathan rested a hand on Ruger's back. You did good, old man. Ruger leaned into him. Emily nodded. He didn't just save the girls, he changed everything that came after. Nathan knew she was right. The lodge wasn't built from new timber, it was built from survival, from loyalty, from a dog's instinct that didn't fade even when the world gave up. As the evening light softened into blue dusk, Ruger lifted his head, ears swiveling toward the path. A family approached, bundled in winter coats, clutching a backpack and paperwork. Another intake, another story, another chance. Ruger stepped forward to greet them. Guardian, survivor, guide. The lodge had its foundation, its heart, its legacy, and it walked on 4 legs. The late afternoon sun washed Pine Hollow Lodge in a soft amber glow, the kind that made the mountain look warmer than it really was. The pine trees swayed gently, their needles whispering in the light breeze. It was quiet here now, peaceful, the kind of quiet you earn, not stumble into. Nathan sat on the front steps of the lodge, elbows on his knees, watching the valley fade toward dusk. Behind him, the door creaked open, and a woman cleared her throat politely. Mr. Cole, I'm Jenna Hartley, Channel 7. He nodded, motioning for her to take a seat on the porch railing. She did, adjusting her recorder as carefully as if she were handling something fragile. We've covered your story for months, she said. The girls, the lodge, the new center. But the audience keeps asking one question, the same question over and over. And I'm hoping you can answer it on camera. Nathan smiled faintly. Let me guess. Ruger, always Ruger. Jenna angled her microphone. All right, I'll ask it just like our viewers submitted it. Do you think Ruger knew what he was digging for that night? Nathan exhaled slowly. His gaze drifted toward the far end of the porch, where Ruger lay stretched out on an old wool blanket. The shepherd's muzzle was dusted with grey now, and his breathing was deep, steady, content. The kind of peace he'd earned 10 times over. Ruger opened one eye as if sensing the attention, then closed it again, tail thumping once. Nathan leaned back, voice soft. He didn't dig for snow. Jenna looked up. He dug for the truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the pines, carrying a long, low sigh through the branches. It felt like the mountain itself was listening. Nathan continued. That night, I thought he was reacting to the storm. Or old instincts, but he knew. Something in him never forgot that the girls were still out there. Didn't follow protocol. He followed his heart. Jenna lowered her recorder for a moment. That line alone is going to break half the country when it airs. Nathan chuckled under his breath. Let it. People should know what loyalty looks like when it refuses to die. Ruger shifted slightly, rolling onto his side with a groan that came from tired bones, not weariness. His eyes met Nathan's, clear and gentle. He always knew. Nathan added quietly. Long before I did. The reporter paused, studying the dog, the lodge, the man beside her. There's something different about this place, she said. It feels lighter, alive. It wasn't always like that. But Ruger changed it? Ruger changed everything. Inside, laughter erupted. 2 kids playing tag down the hallway, Amelia and Harper. They'd been visiting all week. Recovery didn't come in a straight line, but here they walked with confidence. Jenna glanced toward the sound. You saved them, Nathan. The world sees it that way. Nathan shook his head. No, I was just the one holding the rope. Ruger was the one who found them. Jenna gave a small, warm smile. I think the world already knows that. She stood, tucking her recorder into her jacket. One last question before I go. Nathan met her eyes. What do you want people to remember most about this story? Nathan thought about it. About the snow pit, the screams, the years lost, the years regained, the mistakes made, the secrets that tried to stay buried under frost. But then he looked at Ruger. That's easy, he said. Never underestimate a dog who refuses to give up on someone. The breeze curled softly around them. The pine trees swayed again, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Ruger lifted his head, sniffing the air, as if agreeing. Jenna nodded respectfully. Thank you, Nathan. She walked toward her car at the edge of the lot. Nathan stayed where he was, watching the sun sink behind the ridge. The day dimmed into a dusky blue, cool and calm. He reached down and rubbed Ruger's side. You still listening, old boy? Ruger huffed, a soft, contented sound. Then he scooted closer, pressing his weight against Nathan's leg. Nathan whispered, They'll never really know how much of this was you. But I do. Behind them, the lodge lights glowed warm and steady, a beacon in a place that once swallowed people whole. The mountain wasn't silent anymore. It was finally at peace. And for those who had been lost, for those still searching, for those learning to breathe again, Pine Hollow Lodge stood ready. Nathan glanced at the camera Jenna had left rolling for her final shot, then spoke to the quiet evening as if speaking to every person watching across the country. He didn't dig for snow. He dug for the truth. Then, with a gentle smile, what's your story with a loyal pet? If Ruger's journey moved you, make sure to like, share, and support the German Shepherd channel, where every story honors the dogs who show us what bravery really looks like, and the heroes who keep digging beside us.